I think one of the biggest challenges that faces us now, 20 years after the Sustainable Development Commission in the 1980s really came up with this idea of sustainability, which a number of us had been working on for some years, and was put on the map by the World Commission for Environment and Development and Gro Harlem Brundtland, is that since then we've engaged in a mission to create greater sustainability, to pursue sustainable development in this period, and yet underpinning it there is a serious myth. There's a serious problem that faces us at the moment, and it's to do with the idea of what constitutes a perfect model for people's livelihoods in this world. And I'm afraid to say the one model that is really emerging as that which others aspire to in most parts of the world is an industrialized model. Frankly, it's a North American model for how people should run their lives. And so underpinning the problem of sustainable development, which is supposed to bring everybody out of poverty in due course and provide good livelihoods for them, is the notion that consumption patterns at this time and predicted into the future are going to put us in a corner that is going to seriously challenge the very basis of our civilization at the moment. Let me explain with a couple of figures. The number of motor cars in North America amount to 75 per 100 people, and that includes the elderly and the babies. In China, there are 0.7 cars for every 100 people. In India, maybe 1 car for every 100 people. And both those countries will have larger economies than the US within the next 10 to 15 years. And most people who live there, if you ask them what they would like to do, they will say, we'd like to follow the same model that we see in the global media. And there are many other indicators. The average American uses 450 litres of water per day. 25% of the world's population is short of water. So we are over-consuming in the north, and in the south, people would like to adopt the same livelihoods, the same model for their economies. And if that were to be the case, if the North American model were followed by everybody in the world at this time, we would need around about 6 or 7 or 8 planets to resource that, depending on how you calculate these ecological footprint measures. And we don't have them, we've only got the one. So it seems to me the major challenge for organisations such as ActionAid and for everybody involved with pursuing this concern for sustainable development and the emerging worries that we have about climate change is that we need some alternative models after which people can aspire. We're going to need things that people are going to be able to follow that are different. Where does this kind of leave us at the moment? Well, consumption patterns are driving us in a particular direction. There is only the one model. Climate change emerges now as really the first big global environmental problem. We've had environmental problems of major scope, decay of the ozone hole, regional pollution, loss of forests over large areas, but climate change is the first big environmental problem that threatens the very basis of modern civilization, if we wish to put it in that way. If you look back over the last 6,000 years of hominid history, there have been something of the order of 40 or so major civilizations, ones that left big buildings and palaces and ziggurats and stone heads and so forth on the landscape. And they survived on average for around about 1,000 years. And in many of those civilizations, just before the end, there was a state of denial. People didn't realize that problems were occurring. They didn't realize that things were about to go wrong, and they thought they would go on forever. And I think this is a major symptom of our current situation, is that we think we are going to go on forever. We feel as though we are at the end of a long, steady movement of economic and technological progress that has led us to this point. And because of that, we are not sufficiently humble about our current state. So this is, in a sense, I think, kind of a rather gloomy message for where we are at the moment. The prospects of us getting across this century, and I use us in the broader sense, we as the kind of global community, our prospects for getting across this century without there having been a major economic meltdown, I think are getting slimmer. I suspect that our chances might be, on a gloomy day, 30–70%. They might be as good as 50–50. But something is going to create us serious problems unless we have major technological, institutional and policy change that creates these alternative models for people's livelihoods. And that means that all organisations, ActionAid, international organisations, national ones and others, need to think about developing as quickly as possible technologies that don't use up the world's resources, and they could be in agriculture, or energy generation, it could be in building, that have a kind of low footprint on the planet, that are sensitive to ecological concerns. And most of those technologies are going to need a huge leap in a different direction. This means motor cars that don't burn fossil fuels. This means energy generation that doesn't use fossil fuels. And we can't afford to think about it for 20 years and then do something in the next 20 years, because the next 20 years are the ones that really count. So we need that technological change to happen quickly. And of course we need the institutional change that will embed those things within countries, and really, in a sense, the political change to drive that. Now, which of those comes first, I'm not really very sure. In a sense, we need all of them to be happening as quickly as possible. And we're in desperate need of some global leadership. And this doesn't mean me saying that it should be Kofi Annan who says this. What I mean is we need institutions with global reach who have an understanding of many different parts of the world, of the North and the South, of the Americas, of Africa, of Asia, of Pacific Islands to mountain kingdoms. We need organisations who understand that particularity of local place to take forward global leadership and to say, I'm afraid that the way we are doing things at the moment simply won't do. We need to develop alternative models to move ourselves sideways significantly and create aspirations for people who at the moment say, well, you in the North have destroyed your environments, chopped down your forests, you've got so many motor cars per person as in North America, so why shouldn't we do the same? And frankly, we don't have an answer to that, because we can't say, well, we think we should save the world and you should not develop. They'll say, well, show us an alternative. And the development of that alternative to which people may aspire, I think is a critical challenge. And I hope ActionAid can show some of the global leadership to help move that forward. Agriculture and food systems, of course, have a critical role to play in making this transition towards more sustainable patterns. And the good thing that's happened in the past 20 years is that we've seen substantial progress towards more sustainable ways of growing food, of sourcing it, of getting it to people. At the same time, we've seen the emergence of a pandemic of obesity beginning in industrialized countries and now happening in many of the richer parts of developing countries. So consumption patterns remain a major problem in food systems. At the same time, we have some really very good examples of sensitive agricultural production that has increased the levels of food production, but at the same time improved environmental goods and services, which in turn aid food production in a rather kind of nice circle in due course. So we can expect significant progress on that side. The trouble is that what we've achieved in the last 20 years is not nearly enough. What we really need to do is to make that kind of sustainability mission, as it were, within food systems to happen just about on every single hectare of food production in the world. And I would say there's been some progress, but certainly an awful lot of resistance to making that happen in an effective way that helps people's livelihoods and also helps their diets and health as well. The worst case scenarios for climate change are going to mean that we are going to need to understand localization much better in the future. The worst case possibilities following large-scale environmental change will be that the global economy as it currently is constituted will break down, and there will be a need for people to work much more locally and to bring economies to be focused locally. Now that's the worst case. In a sense, we ought to be doing that now. We ought to be focusing on increasing localization to reduce the amount of transport within food systems, for example, to link people up to the land, to understand better environmental and economic challenges. This, I think, is a major mission that we should be promoting at the moment. At the same time, of course, as we localize, we need to be cognizant of the fact that the global media is promoting a certain way of living, and people who live in the Andes or who live in the forest of Africa may indeed have seen Paris, London or New York and wish to visit there. And there still remains a major challenge of creating alternatives for people to make choices that will in the end save the world, but also allow for cultural distinctiveness to continue.